morning. It's a pleasure to be here to try to give some consideration about the linkage between economics and politics. You know that we are in the second year of a new president. It's a woman without a long history in the Brazilian politics and with the burden to replace a very strong political personality that was President Lula. And more than that, to replace a president who preside over one of the most important period of time in the Brazilian history. You know that Lula was elected after another 8 years period of a very important politician in Brazil, that was President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, a remarkable period of presidency. He was responsible for achieve the stabilization of the Brazilian economy after decades of hyperinflation. He presided over a very important structural change in the way that the Brazilian economy works. After stabilizing the economy, he implemented a series of reforms. Maybe the most important was to really open the Brazilian economy to international competition. He restructured the Brazilian government, shrink the size of the government in the economy, mostly through the privatization program. He established the main points for fiscal policy, a responsible fiscal policy, also after a long period of time of irresponsible fiscal policies. And regarding fiscal policy, maybe the most important Fernando Henrique Cardoso achievement was to sell to the Brazilian society that there is a direct link between a stable currency and a responsible fiscal policy. But Fernando Henrique Cardoso worked during his period of time with an aggressive external environment. You remember the Mexican crisis, Asian crisis, Russian crisis, our crisis. And the result of the second term of Fernando Henrique Cardoso present mediocre economic growth. And as Brazil became a real effective democracy, Fernando Henrique Cardoso candidate lost the election, and Lula was elected and brought to the Brazilian politics and to the Brazilian economy the most astonished change that we ever see in Brazil. He was elected with a socialist background, an aggressive socialist background, but after his inauguration, he decided to change, at least in how to see, how to manage the economy. And during his 8 years period of time, at least on the basic macroeconomic pillars of the government action, he just followed the Fernando Henrique Cardoso program. One of the best examples of this behavior is the longest and the most hawkish central bank president we had during the 8 years Lula period of time. Just this reality, it's enough to show how deep was the change in Lula behavior regarding the economy. Maybe there are some rumors among the Brazilians that maybe to have some benefits from this huge and courageous change, God sent the Chinese demand for commodities to help Lula in managing the country and managing the economy. Because it's interesting, and I think that I have here a chart that shows. This is the Brazilian terms of trade. And you can see that till 2004, Brazil had a very, very weak terms of trade. The numbers show that Brazil, during a long period of time, for each $100 export, Brazil could afford to buy $80 of imports. Export 100 to get 80 as an import. And after 2004, this number starts to increase and reach 130 at the very end of the Lula's terms. That say that Brazil then, for each $100 of export, we could buy $130 of import. Just this change in the Brazilian terms of trade was create a 1.5% of GDP economic growth. It's an external shock, positive external shock, that represent during the most part of Lula's terms 1.5% of GDP growth above the normal GDP growth. And it was the terms of trade that created a second round of change in Brazil economy, that was a huge increase on our trade surplus. That also it's very clear in the chart, start just after the inauguration of Lula's government. Terms of trade, improvement on trade surplus. The next step, the real start to strengthen, and the real become a very, very strong, and more than that, trustable currency. And a trustable currency allow the Brazilian companies to start using imports as an extra supply in the Brazilian economy. This is crucial to understand the Lula's success, because above all this structural transformation, then Lula start acting according to his own understanding, according left-wing politics. And he did that through a very strong instrument in the Brazilian economy, that is the minimum wage. Minimum wage in Brazil is one of the key elements of the labor market. 2/3 of the Brazilian workers earn between 1 and 3 minimum wage. And always that you have a real increase in minimum wage, you have this real increase pressed through the other wage in the economy. And Lula did that since 2004. An average 12% real increase in minimum wage. As this is the most traditional instrument of a left-wing politician managing the economy of a country. The problem with this policy, and you have several examples on history, that doing that artificially, you create inflation in the economy because there is an immediate response on the demand side, but no response on the supply side. But in Brazil, this didn't happen because the external supply that came through imports may balance the good market, and instead of inflation increase, we had a deflation in Brazil. This combination is crucial to understand why, when Lula left the government, 2010, he had more than 70% of public approval, of public recognition. And because of that, Dilma was elected. Dilma was an unknown politician in Brazil. He's hard a politician in the sense to know how to talk to the people, how to make the people look at her. He was a very, very bureaucrat people. And he was elected because Lula appointed her as his successor. And then he inherited also the bright economic situation, and more than bright economic situation, the bright feeling of the Brazilian society. I have here some charts. This is I like very much this chart. Is a chart that links the price of a popular car in Brazil to minimum wage. And here's the number of minimum wage that you have to use to buy a popular car. And then we shift from 160 minimum wage to 40 minimum wage. The car, and when I'm talking about car, I'm talking about television sets, I'm talking about all the durable goods that you have in Brazil. There is an incredible increase in the purchase power of the median Brazilian. This is the minimum wage during this period of time. And then, with this stimulus that came from a strong currency, a strong external situation, and an increase on wage, real wage in Brazil, the economy started growing, and then the banks in Brazil start increasing their credit allowance to companies, but mostly to individuals. And then you have the perfect combination. Wage increase, employment increase, credit increase. The final result is incredible increase in the consumption. And the result with this incredible combination was unemployment started to going down. Lula was elected with 12% of unemployment rate. The employment rate in the coming months will reach 5.5%. This also shows the average income of the Brazilian. And you can see on the second part of the chart the Lula period of time. And the final result was, for the first time in the Brazilian society, a huge movement in terms of social class. Maybe 30 million Brazilians during this period of time come from the GE class. It's a class without any formal labor contract, without any possibility of get a bank loan, and these people become a low, medium class. And this is the retail sale in Brazil. And the Brazilian average are similar to the American people. They are happy when they are buying things. And with this chart of retail sale, I could use the name of happiness index or something like that. And here is also a chart showing the GDP per capita in Brazil. You have the blue one is the average in the total Brazil. The red one is in São Paulo area, and the south, that is the richest part. According to our estimation, Brazil average income will reach $16,000, $17,000 in 2020, and in the richest part of Brazil, $24,000, $25,000. But let's come back to the Dilma government, because it's easy to understand why Dilma was first elected, and second, why Dilma today, in the last measure of public support, is even more popular than Lula. If you take the last poll and compare to the last poll of Lula period, Dilma is more popular than Lula. And Dilma is the most likely winner of a 2014 presidential election. This is done. But let's look at the Dilma itself. First, Dilma is a complete different political person than Lula. Yeah? And one of the crucial elements of difference is ideology. Lula, it's easy to understand now the reason of his incredible change. Lula's life was the trade union leader for his whole life. And the trade union is a guy accustomed to negotiation, to change their demands, to accommodate their demands. And in politics, he did the same thing. When he felt that the Fernando Henrique Cardoso policy was creating a positive environment in Brazil, he didn't hesitate to change his idea. Dilma is different. Dilma has strong ideas and unhappy, in my opinion, the wrong ideas about how to manage a market economy. Till now, these wrong ideas has become, in a certain sense, hidden by the success of the economy and her success among the and why Dilma is different. As the first phrase, the new president has placed pragmatism ahead of ideology. But she's much less pragmatic than Lula. She doesn't have the same experience in life that Lula did as a trade union. She is clearly a technocrat because his life, his political life, his professional life has been the life of a technocrat. But the worst part of Dilma, that he brought to the government this economic thinking very, very identified with one of the branch of the Keynesian thinks of the last century. This thinking, this economic thinking, is based on a university in São Paulo, in Campinas, is a city close to São Paulo. I can talk hours about the economic thinking because I gave class for 6 years there before I realized how wrong all these ideas were. But the whole economic team of Dilma came from Unicamp and believed on Unicamp ideas. And because of that, if you take a close look to the Dilma's government, mostly after the second part of last year, you can identify this change. Till now, Dilma maintained the same key elements of the macroeconomic policy from the Lula period of time. But now we are seeing change in the monetary policy, in the way that the central bank handled the monetary policy, a complete lack of independence, contrary to the Lula period of time when Meirelles had complete independence to take the monetary decisions. And now the government has changed the real management, dirt management system. And they are, according to my opinion, the government is moving to some kind of fixed exchange rate system, trying to devaluate the real, trying to avoid the market force that basically, from the terms of trade, create the environment for a strong currency, trying to stop any kind of short-term or medium-term capital movement, and more recently, to send a clear message to the market that I'm buying dollars to push dollars to another level, maybe two. And the third element of Lula period of time that are now being changing is protectionism. Use tax, use several other instruments to trying to put a wall between external market and internal market. The government called this the disindustrialization process of the Brazilian economy. These are the three main change that we are seeing now, and these three main changes are compatible with the Unicamp thinking. Another thing that's important to understand why Dilma is trying to change some stable elements of the economic policy is that, and this again, there are people who always link Lula to a God decision to give him a very, very positive mandate. Because after Lula left the government and after Dilma inaugurated the government, a new set of economic problems arise in Brazil. And most of this new set of economic problems came naturally from the success of 6 years of the economic growth in Brazil. Are problems that arise naturally in a market economy after a long period of a kind of economic boom. I'll give in my opinion, the best example, unemployment rate. The unemployment rate in Brazil in around 5.5% is well below the so-called narrow unemployment rate level. It's clear that there is no available pool of new workers to respond to the labor market demand. The result, wages are increasing above productivity increasing and start to creating inflation here. A second set of problems also came naturally after 4 years of profound change in the economy due to the opening of the economy, due to the imports penetration in the Brazilian industry. It took 4 or 5 years to reach the present situation because it's natural. Brazil, during 30 years, was a closed economy without any comprehensive channels to bring imports to the Brazilian market. But after 4 years of strong currency, trustable currency, internal demand, all these channels are now well established. And import in Brazil become a day-to-day normal procedure for companies, for individuals, for the commercial people, shops. And then we start suffering from the conflict of an economy that used to be closed with this, the new dynamic of import. And because this is important, because a closed economy, the companies don't have to care about costs because it's closed. The consumer will pay whatever whatever the price will be at the end of the production chain. But now it is not possible. They can import cars, they can import several other consumer products. The company can import components, can import raw material. The only thing that you can't import is workers, people, because it's much more difficult. And then we realize how inefficient was the production structure in Brazil. For instance, energy, electricity in Brazil is 4 times the price of the electricity in the United States and several other countries. Natural gas in Brazil is 6 times the price of natural gas in the United States and 4 or 3 times more than other countries. Wages are increasing above productivity, and in dollar terms, it's increasing twice the productivity. Roads. I'll give another example. The government is trying to protect the automotive industry. And because of that, the price of a truck in Brazil is 3 times the price of a truck in other countries, the countries that compete with us. The same with cars, but car it's less important. Truck is an instrument of production. The ports. And during the last 1.5 years, this problem start becoming crucial. And as we are exporting products that are with increased demand, increased price, when you look to the trade balance, when you look to the current account, it is not so shocked, this change. But when you look to the industrial production, because the industry produce tradable goods, the goods that are suffering from the competition of import. And when you look to industry, you can see very clear that we are losing our competitiveness, and we are losing our capacity to export, and we are substitute local production by import. This is a crucial element why the Brazilian growth is now falling. During the last years of Lula, maybe the potential growth of the Brazilian economy was 5%. Today, my guess is we are moving to 3%. It's impossible to increase more than 3%. And it's not a lack of demand. Demand in Brazil is growing 6.5% a year. It's because now the competition are changing the balance between local and production and import. And this is a crucial and difficult element to face. Because of that, the government, instead of trying to understand the real limits, the real traps that we are suffering, they are using the other instrument that increase protection and devaluate the currency to try to give some breathing space to the Brazilian industry. Yesterday I told to another group of people that the main difference between Dilma's agenda or Dilma's government and Lula is Lula used during his 8 years all the spare capacity that we had in the economy. As we see, the credit was 20% of GDP, today is 50% of GDP. The individuals' indebtedness now represent 23–25% of their revenues instead of 4 or 5% 10 years ago. There are structural change that came from this consumption and investment, consumption and reforms. And the poor Dilma is now facing this problem. Of course, when you look to the results of the economy, and when you look to the public support of Dilma, this is difficult to say this, because the economy continues to grow, consumption continues to grow, and the president is more popular than Lula. But if you take the economic dynamic of Brazil today, 2012, and try to project the problems for the next 2 or 3 years, the picture is completely different. And my feeling is that the government, instead to understand that we have a new set of structural reforms to be handled, instead of that, they try to use the old-fashioned leftist instruments to protect the Brazilian industry. Then we will enter in a much more difficult period of time for the Brazilian economy. If you ask me what kind of percentage I put for this scenario. I think that is 70, 2/3. My understanding today is the government, instead of look at the real problem, instead of start some reforms, the fiscal reforms, privatization, again, the most difficult problem to face is the low unemployment, because the people that are unemployed today is the people without any skill to respond to the market, the labor market demand. This is difficult to track. But even that, I think that the first reaction of Dilma, the first reaction of the government, will not to face the real challenges, but to use artificial elements to try to maintain the economic growth. Okay? Thank you very much.